Introduction to Philosophy, Metaphysics and Epistemology, Reality and Knowledge. Chapter 2. The second chapter in our text seems to be a bit out of place for a section on knowledge and skepticism, and would probably be more appropriate in the last chapter on ethics. However, the questions asked do have some bearing on epistemology in some sense. For example, it implicitly raises questions of moral knowledge and whether there are any differences between moral knowledge and preference knowledge. Indeed, it takes some imagination on our parts to link this chapter to the central themes of this section and to our class as a whole. That being said, this chapter does include a classic thought experiment from the history of philosophy known as the trolley problem, and applies it in an interesting way to advancements in modern technology. So we can forgive our text for the cumbersome placement of this chapter. Our text begins by setting a scene for us in which a car shopper, Hillary, and a salesman, Bob, are going over the safety features and the options available for the vehicle Hillary is considering purchasing. To explain these options, Bob introduces Hillary to the trolley problem. The trolley problem, as I said, is a thought experiment in which one must decide between two courses of action, or more accurately, a choice of action and a choice of inaction. There are 5 people tied down to one set of tracks, and one person on another set of tracks. There is an out-of-control trolley headed down the tracks with the 5 people tied down, but you could pull a lever to redirect the trolley toward the one person. Some people have the intuition that inaction is not immoral in this case, and opt not to participate in an effort to avoid the moral blame for someone else's death. However, others see allowing 5 people to die when you have the opportunity to limit the amount of death to 1 is morally impermissible, and would opt to pull the lever. The example in this version is supposed to appeal to a utilitarian conception of morality, in which moral actions are those that produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people. However, in other versions of this problem, the one person on the track is replaced with a child or a family member, and our intuitions typically shift, since we often place greater moral weight on children and family members than we do on complete strangers. What's interesting about this application of the trolley problem is that it shows us that self-driving cars need to have an answer to this question. For example, if the car cannot stop for some reason and is headed towards a crowd of people, should it use its detection features to turn towards larger detected humans? But again, these are ethical questions, not really metaphysical or epistemological. But this does give us an opportunity to think of how this could be a metaphysical question. If the safety settings were not determined by Hillary, but instead by the car's onboard AI system, perhaps we could formulate a metaphysical argument for the identity of the car as a moral agent. But as it is, Hillary is making the decisions, so this story doesn't tell us much about metaphysics. In some loose sense, the question of how can I know what the moral decision is an epistemological question. But all in all, this really would have been more appropriate in the ethics section of this text. However, there is value in contrasting major branches of philosophy, as we are doing here with metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. I find it helpful when explaining what something is to also explain what it is not. The hope is that after reading this chapter and listening to this lecture, you'll better be able to recognize when a problem, a philosophical problem, is metaphysical or epistemological. Indeed, this is often quite difficult for students at first. It's a valuable practice. In fact, as we read through our text, try to determine for yourself which questions and arguments are metaphysical, epistemological, neither, or possibly both. This will be difficult, but that's okay. It's okay not to get it. Your professors have been studying their fields for years, So don't get discouraged if you don't get it on your first pass. Aparia, the feeling of confusion that we get when we're trying to figure something out, is a healthy state of mind. It opens our eyes to the truth that life is hard and things are complicated. So go easy on yourself.